Welcome to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by DraftKings. I'm Mike Calabrese. I'm joined by Josh Nunn, aka Duck, and Christian Odjakjian again for some midweek college hoops action. We're going to be with you every single Wednesday all the way through the end of the season. So you're going to always come to us for kind of a broader look at college hoops. We're going to give you look aheads for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday games, but we also want to get you in a position where you can add to your futures portfolio. That's conference titles, Final Four, national title, making the tournament odds, all kinds of, interesting markets that open throughout the regular season and start to pick up a little bit more volume in terms of sports bettors at this time of year as college football winds down and there's more interest on the college hardwood. All right, let's just jump right into it here, Duck. I want to hear something that's been interesting you, a trend, a conference that overarchingly is either piquing your interest from a gambling perspective or just the brand of basketball that's being played.
Well, I think the MAC is such a fun league this year and competitive at the top. And is the MAC a two-bid league? That's the question that I would have. Miami of Ohio has been a big surprise this season, 16-0. Travis Steele, a true program build. We haven't seen a lot of that with the one and done era and teams just reloading. But when you get a real program rebuild, this is a really cool story to see. We saw it back in 2024 where it kind of started with the Red Hawks. Finished 15-17, but much more competitive in league play. And then last year they really turned the corner. Finished 25-9 and so close to making the NCAA tournament if you look back to that MAC championship game and how that ended. And now these guys are rolling. I look at Miami of Ohio. They're incredibly fun to watch and they're efficient offensively. They're top 25 per KenPom in 2.3 point and foul shooting, and they just don't turn the ball over. They got 5 guys that average double figures. 7 players have made at least 10 3-point shots this year. Shooters everywhere for the Red Hawks. And, some projections have them as an 11 seed in the tournament. So it begs the question that if this team keeps rolling and we get another team in the MAC, Akron, John Gross has this bunch playing really, really good basketball right now. I would expect the Zips to rack up the MAC wins in bunches this year. And we could have 2 teams that have less than 4 or 5 losses now that are possibly a destiny and squaring up for the MAC championship run. I wonder if these 2 teams continue to take care of business if we don't see a 2-bid league here out of the MAC this season.
Christian, what are your thoughts on a potential 2-bid out of the Mid-American? It'll probably require 30-plus wins out of the at-large bid team, but Miami's churning along. They have held their own against the best in the conference thus far, and it seems as though their shooting is bulletproof. Like, whether they're on the road, home, neutral floor, they're just knocking down shots all over the place.
I know they got hurt by the bid stealers, but I'm still mad about Indiana State 2 years ago. That team went 28-6. You lose at Drake, at Michigan State, at Alabama, at Southern Illinois. If they don't drop that home one to Illinois State, maybe that's the deal breaker. But really low margin of error for Miami, Ohio. They'd have to, I think, 3 games they're probably in. But even if you start to lose 4, I'm thinking back to teams like New Mexico State or Stephen F. Austin, in the last half decade that, with a 4-loss team was a 12 seed, and it's like they're probably not getting in with a loss in the conference championship. But when I watched that Miami Akron game Saturday, I was way more impressed with Akron, if I'm being honest. I think Miami really struggling from that loss of Ipsaro, the point guard. They're still a really good team. Like, as Doug said, Travis Steele's done an incredible job. You can't argue with the results, but I'm looking at Akron as like a team that would be potentially the best, not counting like a St. Mary's, like the best mid-major team in the tournament should they get in. So I'm sneaky rooting for, I would just love a 2-bid MAC. So I hope Miami loses like 1 or 2 games and can get in at large or something. But Akron is the best team in this league. I agree with the metrics. They shot 8 of 32 from deep and they lost to Miami, and they're a great 3-point shooting team. They had a lot of open looks. Nothing easy for Miami at the rim. Akron's got, much more athletic guys, more guys who can create. I love the way they play.
Tavari, their point guard, by the way, one of 3 players in the entire country, 20 points per game, 5 assists per game. It's Cruz Davis from Hofstra and then Philon from Alabama. That's it. That's the entire list.
Oh, and one other thing. Miami is, Miami's 4th nationally in minutes continuity. Akron's 18th. Look what happens when you can keep players and they can develop. Tavari Johnson's gotten better all 4 years. Like, I hope guys around college basketball and high school kids are going, I can have a good career if I go to a good coach and stick it out and get better.
One thing I want to talk about in terms of the national landscape is, do we have some kind of ratings inflation problem going on? Because let's just look at KenPom for a second. In 2023, UConn won the national title with a net rating of 29.86. This was the same Husky team that stumbled a bit in January that year and then won 12 of 13 down the stretch, covered every single game in March Madness. Yet there are eight teams right now in Division I basketball with a higher net rating according to KenPom. So I have to pose this question to the group. It's unlikely that the majority of those teams are going to finish truly better than that UConn national championship team. It bears to reason that it's going to be one, maybe two, three max that are actually better on the floor than that UConn team. But you go through it: Arizona, Michigan, Iowa State, Purdue, Gonzaga, Vanderbilt, UConn, Duke. Of this group, who do you think is the potential fraud, at least from a super high-end ceiling perspective? It's the Zags for me. I don't think they deserve to be in this mega elite conversation. They just needed overtime to beat Seattle. Seattle's a pretty good low major team, actually a very good low major team. I'll give them their flowers. But at the same time, that's more the Bulldogs kind of not being focused for 40 minutes of basketball. They needed to have a comeback just to get it to overtime. They lose by 40 points to Michigan. And, I also just think from a March Madness perspective, their point guard situation does not fill me with confidence. In, previous years, whether it was Nebhard or other guys running the point, I knew who was going to have the ball in crunch time. And if you told me that Braden Smith had seized the point guard, role and was playing, 30 minutes a game and was dishing out close to 10 assists, I'd feel better about this team. He's barely on the floor for 18 minutes a game. They have Worley. Sometimes it's Miller. I know they share the basketball incredibly well, but to win 4 or 5 games in the tournament, I'm a little bit skittish on this Mark Few team, at least being in the neighborhood with some of these other teams. Christian, do you agree with that, or is there another team on this list that you think is a little bit overrated at this point in the season?
That UConn net rating stat is insane, by the way. Like, they were number 1 in KenPom by the end of non-conference play. Obviously, they tripped up in the Big East, but you'd think after all that they finished with that they would have topped 30. I totally agree with your knock on Gonzaga. I just think you can put them in Penn in the Sweet 16. So it's I don't know, matchup dependent, but I definitely agree that, after playing in the WCC for a couple months, that they could definitely run into a team ranked lower than them on KenPom right now that is a better team come March. I don't know if there's really a fraud. I'm super high on Vanderbilt. Do I think that they're necessarily a 1 or a 2 seed come March? No, just because the SEC is so tough. I think they're probably a top 4 seed. And then Duke had a great win at Louisville, but and their resume is so good that they could get tripped up in the ACC and still be a 1 or 2 seed. But they definitely have things to figure out and some weaknesses that we've seen too. So I'm definitely tracking Duke to see if they're trending upward as ACC play goes on.
I know we talked offline, Duck, about Duke's issues, recently against Georgia Tech, Florida State on the defensive end. Do you think they'll get that, buttoned up? Shire certainly in years past has made his bones as a defensive coach, being able to really lock things down in the half court. Some of their metrics are incredible, how they defend the 3-point arc, for example. But the Florida State and Georgia Tech game, was it more so playing down to the opponent, not taking it seriously? I know the Yellow Jackets shot 75% in that game, at least in the first half. So that was kind of a bit of an outlier. But where do you come down on the Blue Devils at this point?
I mean, that was in my notes to talk about Duke. Are we sure that this group is in another stratosphere in terms of their talent, their cohesiveness, and to be considered a team that should be rated at this sort of statistical outlier threshold? I don't know that we should. You talked about some of the results, but being tested by Florida, Michigan State, Louisville, Florida State, Arkansas, the list goes on and on. A good team, and I think when you look at the lack of continuity, they haven't played a lot of basketball together. So I think you see some things on the defensive end when the offense gets rolling with Duke. Sometimes the defense takes the night off, and days where their defense really steps up, we see them struggle on the offensive end. So I think the second half of the season, specifically in this case, is really important for Duke so they can continue to gel as a team. And I mean, they don't have to win the ACC title to do some noise in the tournament, but I just think this group needs to play more. They need more time in the seat. They need to go through some of these pressure situations, and ultimately that'll help them in late March.
One other Duke note, love how much Malik Brown and Dame Sarr we got against Louisville, because those are their 2 best defenders outside of, Cam Boozer, but only 10 minutes were gone by. I understand he was in foul trouble, but I think the five of, especially if Caleb Foster is going to be aggressive, getting to the basket like he was, Foster, Evans, Boozer, Brown, and Sarr is the lineup that I want to see more. I know people are throwing Gongba in the lottery. I understand he can do some fun things back to the basket and as a passer, but like I don't want him shooting threes. That's the five that I want to see more out of Duke from.
Now, as we get into conference play, obviously the grinds, the travel, it can be difficult in these power conferences. And when you fast forward to Selection Sunday and when the bracket's revealed, I really do care about road performance, neutral site performance. A lot of teams can get up and play their best basketball on their home court. You're clearly not doing that in the big dance. So that's something that you've zeroed in on right now, with some teams struggling a little bit more than you expected, Christian.
Yeah, I feel like this happens every year where I start, there's teams that I know I like, and then I'm like looking at some lines. I'm like, ooh, this is, they're only 2-point favorites on the road in this spot. But like one of my example from last night, or UCF Oklahoma State. Like UCF finally enters the rankings. They're playing great, but there's just something intuitively in my body that's just like Oklahoma State's going to win this game. Like they're coming off a loss, right? And this is just it just sets up the spot after this big home win at Kansas. Everyone's run on the court. Now you got to go play this fast-paced team comfortable on their home court. And another example of this was, and I know Nebraska beat Ohio State, right? But in that second half, the way Ohio State defended, right? That's like the worst I had seen Nebraska's offense look, because, this building's going nuts. There's all this ball pressure, and all of a sudden you can't get into your sets. You're asking for Mass to kind of be a hero ball, or you've got these guys. Lawrence was on the bench, and it was Hoiberg and Jacobson they weren't able to create off the bounce, which isn't what they're supposed to do. Like they just weren't able to function highly in just these environments, especially at the beginning. You've got freshmen. We've had some weird layoffs, of course, around the holidays. These next 2 weeks, it's really, I have to have a really strong reason for why I'm backing a road team. It doesn't mean always back the home team. It just means you have to take some of these spots seriously and take into account things like this game will have happened by the time this podcast comes out, but I'll be on Virginia Tech tonight against Stanford. This is Abuko Corey's first road game. He missed the one at San Jose State. He was out for that. And you're traveling cross country off this loss for Louisville. Virginia Tech just played Wake, close, tough loss there. You're getting Toby Lawal back. I'm just taking a lot into account, but definitely leaning towards home teams and looking more for home teams to back. But then at the end of the day, there's some really good values you're getting on away teams. If you just think they're a way better basketball team and they match up well, it's like you're getting great prices for road teams too. So,
speaking of home away splits, I'm going to put you on the spot right now. Nebraska against Indiana. Do you think that's going to be the first loss of the season for the Corn?
Yes. I do.
Yeah, I think the analytics community is with you there. Duck, do you agree?
I would guess so. That they might be an environment they struggle in.
All right, let's switch up to any rants that we have. We've been burning on a little bit. Shout out to the Jim Rome show on, what was it, ESPN2 back in the day. Duck, this is an issue. We've all been there as college basketball bettors. You absolutely nail a bet for 38, 39 minutes, and then something falls apart, slips through your fingers in the final 60 seconds, whether it's late game coaching management or defensive letdowns. What has you ticked off coming into this episode?
Well, it happened twice to me in recent days. Georgia State goes out and scores 67 points in the second half against Coastal Carolina. Not on my bingo card on Saturday of last week. You look at Georgia State, they were 315th in the most recent KenPom offensive efficiency metrics. You look at how the game finished in their shot selection. If you look at a site like SQ Bets, which will grade games based on shots that a team takes, how likely those shots are to go in, whatever else. Well, that game should have finished 69-61, and Georgia State should have lost. It was just incredible to see when you play an under and you've got a game that is trending under the entire time, and it's just one small stretch that defense is optional, and that's all it takes. Happened to me last night too with Minnesota and Iowa. You get some fluky late game stuff where a team that hasn't made a shot all night suddenly buries a deep three, triggers the fouling. So that is, just part of working through that. It's the variance in a highly variant sport. And another thing I'll say too, part of anyone's handicapping, those road spots that we just talked about are so tricky. We've seen teams like North Texas, Irvine almost lost to Bakersfield in one of their recent conference openers. UC San Diego got burned on the road. Michigan State, Louisville, Quinnipiac losing to Manhattan. I mean, it's just tough to go win on the road. And so oftentimes when you've got the presumed better, more superior team laying a short number on the road, that is so tricky to want to lay points on the road in league play. So it was a good lookout. So for anyone betting with us, make sure to keep that in mind.
For your rant, Christian, it looks like you were the ghostwriter for John Calipari. He just went off on this with you have 26-year-old semi-pros, full-time pros coming in playing. They got first and second wives in the crowd. They got kids. All of his jokes aside, it's interesting that of all people, when it comes to paying players or having players come in and out in a turnstile, Calipari doesn't have a whole lot to stand on, but at the end of the day, he is right. And it's just interesting, at least in the SEC, a lot of people would use the meme of like the worst person just made a really good point. And it's that at this point, these midseason transfers are just throwing off competitive balance potentially. There's a couple that you want to highlight, and I just want to hear your thoughts overall on roster building when you can bring in grown-ass men who've been playing overseas or getting paychecks in the G League.
The community of our beautiful sport seems very aligned on this. Not only that we need the framework, but like that it's ridiculous that a James Najee is added to Baylor. But Kyrie Walker is even worse than James Najee. Like I have an ounce of, I have a tiny bit of empathy towards the James Najee in the sense that he never signed the contract and like he was playing for Barcelona like the whole time. He's from like this small village in Nigeria and like he wasn't ready for the NBA, whatever. And it's not like he's going to go and dominate, which maybe would help the case, honestly, if some guy joins midseason and does dominate. But Kyrie Walker was on the Capital City Go-Go with like Cassius Winston and Pat Spencer like 5 years ago. Dude was a 5-star recruit. He thought that he could make the NBA after a year in the G League, and he was wrong. He's been to Greece, Canada, Mongolia. He's been all over the place. He thought he was too good for college basketball. It's been 5 years. Dude, let it go. Have a little bit of pride, maybe. I don't know. Like, obviously, this is the NCAA's fault, but I just think this is absolutely embarrassing on Kyrie Walker's part. And I mean, who even knows how good he is because he was in Mongolia and Canada in the last leagues. But like, I think that it's such a mind meld because I want the. If one of these guys comes in and dominates, it just makes it so ridiculous that they're here. But if they come in and they're not good, it's not helping the case. So I'm in this thing where I don't want them to succeed, but if it succeeds, it kind of helps prove the point. So I'm interested to see who grabs him, and they're going to get booed and shamed. Like people are not happy with Scott Drew around college basketball. I'm talking like his peers.
Now, Duck, I know that you live in FCS football at the college football level. So sometimes when those transfers come up, you have some kind of rubric or some kind of formula to be able to say success at the FCS level. What could we expect in the transfer portal? Any Mongolian basketball pipeline to college hoops? Like, does 17 points per game against Mongolians translate to 7.5 in a major conference? Like, what are your thoughts on this whole thing?
I don't know how those ratios would play out. I'd say probably divide by 12, and that's the production we're going to see here. But who really knows? Every case is different. I mean, is this where we're at with it now, where you can just grab these cast-offs that it didn't pan out? I mean, there were guys that were being talked about that had actually played in the NBA and never made it, and now they want to go back to college. I just cannot believe that this has exposed such a loophole in the eligibility kind of criteria and what you have to be, what you don't have to be. And I think the people who pay the price the worst are high school athletes and athletes that want to stick it out at a school and compete for a position. Very few kids have to really compete anymore. They don't have to battle for their spot. They don't have to battle for playing time. They don't have to earn it in practice, because if they're not getting what they want, they're just going to transfer someplace else and there's no penalty. So something needs to be done.
All right, speaking of having a bit of pride, I'm going to throw this out there for my quick rant. Micah Shrewsbury, what are you doing, man? I know that you were mad, but what do you like the way that he charged at that ref after the game? What, are you going to knock his teeth out? Like he's got 4 assistants and players holding him back. Was it a bad call on the 4-point play? I've certainly seen worse calls. I would also point out that the kid's out of position. You probably don't want to foul in that situation, not giving up a 3, setting him to the line for 2, up by 3. You don't want to foul right at the 3-point stripe. And instead of keeping him in front of him, he's reaching out. I still think, yes, it probably should have been a foul on the floor, but like for him to explode like that and then also just get like a written reprimand from the ACC and not get suspended by Notre Dame. You represent Notre Dame. You want to pretend at least that you have more class in the situation. You're making what, $3 or $4 million a year. You have to be at a higher level, at least in my opinion. We're now at the point where all these players are making millions of dollars in NIL money, and we're starting to hold them to a higher threshold and a higher standard, saying that, you guys have to conduct yourself as professionals. The same goes for coaches. I thought it was embarrassing, that reaction. Just a quick around the horn. What did you think of that endgame scenario against Cal Berkeley?
I mean, you obviously can't do that. And it's, I just think coaches are such role models, right? In terms of how they impact young lives and like the respect that they're given. And it's like, we give them such leeway to just act like complete maniacs. Even like a Dan Hurley who got flamed for his behavior at times. I know it hasn't been as much in the headlines. Like, I don't want to, be knocking those guys. I would probably be pretty psycho in that moment too. But I think there needs to be more than a public reprimand when no matter what the call was, if you bull charge at a ref.
Duck, do you agree?
Part of me really wishes he would have been able to get there just so we could know what he said to him. I mean, I really want to know what he was planning to say or planning to do. What was his next move if he would have reached him? I think it's a bad look. I think it's the guy cares and the guy wants an explanation. And I think people want refereeing to be held to some sort of accountability standard. So I can appreciate the passion. I know that all three of us here really care about what we're doing and our craft is important to us. And if you experience a bad beat, it really can stick with you and it's not fun. So in his mind, he probably felt like he experienced a bad beat. He probably wanted an explanation for it. He was trying to go about getting an answer quickly and went about it the wrong way. But I don't know. I kind of like the passion.
Well, I want to ask you guys this. Do you think that the way that was handled, just I'm talking now from a basketball perspective of the way that continuation was called, do you think that impacts the way that coaches are looking at fouling up three late in games now? Like, and do you kind of like that, even whether it was the correct call or not? Do you like this idea of you're really playing with fire? Because last year, I remember Brooks Barnheiser against Butler, there were a couple examples where it looked like you could have given it to him on the continuation. They didn't get it. And part of me was kind of like, good, that's what you get for fouling up three. If you don't do it right, in the backcourt, like that can happen.
That last point you made, I'm in that camp where it's like, if you foul that close, if you're talking, it's a bang, bang, like in this case, by the way, I think it should have been a foul on the floor, but it was razor close and you allowed him to get to where he wanted to be on the floor for his shot. I think you're playing with fire in that situation and you have to take some responsibility on your own, both the coaching of it, exactly when you're trying to execute the foul, and the player's performance on the floor. So I agree with you. I think, people don't like to say this in basketball because we end up always looking at reviews and it's down to the hundredth of a second, like that Auburn shot against A&M. The bottom line for me is it's a little bit closer to baseball where it's like the tie goes to the runner. I think the tie should go to the shooter. I think the tie should go to the offensive player and get the continuation if it's really that close. What do you think, Duck?
I think it would help to have a little bit more of a defined parameter around it. The way that this situation played out is very similar to bang, bang, pass interference or holding. There is a case to be made that the foul should remain on the floor. There's a case to be made that it was continuation, and the truth probably lies someplace in the middle. So how do you define what that looks like and then get it to the coaches who can get it to the players so we all know what the same rules are? I mean, my personal preference is you foul up three. But you don't want to leave it to the ref's discretion either. Just foul at the right spot. Make sure you do it in the backcourt. Make sure you are smart about what you're trying to do so that way it doesn't come down to somebody else's discretion rather than your own.
All right, before we get into best bets, I have one future that I'm going to bring to the table and officially put out there. Duck and I were discussing it beforehand. Houston to win the national title is 17-1. I've seen enough. Kingston Fleming, the way that he's taking over, the shot making, the no fear late in games, I think it was the missing piece. I was surprised that they made it all the way to the title game last year because I thought some of their late game issues or who was being the primary ball handler may have bit them earlier in that run. I was more enamored with their teams when they had Shed. At least I knew that he was going to be somebody who could not only make shots late, but also just handle the pressure. Kingston is just an absolute dog. This kid is unbelievable. And you saw it earlier in the season. Sampson went to the media and basically said, if he can play harder and more consistently on defense, I'm never going to take this kid off the floor. And what has he done? He's done exactly that. And now he's knocking down big shots to take down Texas Tech. 17-1. I think this is the last time we're going to get them north of 15-1 this season. I think their ceiling is absolutely national title. I feel very comfortable. Depending on the seeding, a big part of this is like which region do they end up being in. But if they're in a region with Arizona as a 1 or a 2 flip-flopped, I feel great about them winning and getting to the Final Four. Christian, what are your thoughts at this price point on the Houston Cougars?
Love it. My bag's already packed. My bags have been packed since July at like 12-1. So maybe I'll add a little sprinkle at 17-1. But you saw, and like Texas Tech was awesome in that game. Houston will lose between 2 and 4 Big 12 games max. Like there is a standard at that program and under Coach Sampson that is so consistent on a nightly basis that is not replicated anywhere else. And now that you're seeing that ceiling being unlocked with Flemings, I want more from Sinak, by the way. I think that there's times when he has smaller defenders on him, and I want to see him be aggressive, and he's never doing it. So I'm hoping we get that out of him. But this is a 1 or 2 seed, most likely a 1 seed, depending on if they can pass Iowa State or Arizona and win this league in the regular season. But the floor is so high for a second weekend, and the ceiling is at the moon right now when you have that firepower.
The mental fortitude of that team, watching the second half, Texas Tech made some big boy 3-pointers where it's like, all right, they're going to pull away. It's just their night. They're making contested threes. And Houston just has no quit in them whatsoever. They're just such a tough out, so hard to kill. Duck, do you think 17-1 is too good to pass up, or is there a reason to keep money on the sideline at this point?
No, I like Houston. I liked him last year. I like him this year, too. You look at Flemings as just such a player and adds such a unique element for them. We haven't seen Houston play their best offensive basketball either. They have struggled for long stretches this year to knock down shots. And the way that they control the terms it's such a contagious and infectious attitude with the way that their defense plays. When they're up 20, up 30, last 5 minutes, you're closing things out. Nothing cheap. Everyone's playing to the whistle. Everybody is contesting shots. I mean, these guys are so buttoned up defensively. And really, even in these situations where they've played these closer than expected games, the run always comes defensively. They shut you down for 5 or 6 minutes where you go 1 of 9, 2 points in 5 minutes. And that's where really the run kicks in. Well, that's NCAA tournament basketball. That's quintessential Kelvin Sampson coached basketball from Houston. I think this team still has a ways to go to kind of prop their ceiling up. If they start knocking down open jumpers, which they've gone a long stretch this year where they haven't, this team could be really dangerous.
Last note, real quick, they got no bench points last night. He wasn't really trusting a lot of those guys, but there's still 5 guys that can make an impact. And Harwell's the guy that I've circled because he's a guy who can hit multiple threes and like has some pop off the bounce too. But just hoping that more trust, a guy like Sacco too, to be able to rotate in and get some big man minutes as well.
Before we get into some of our actual bets for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday, let's toss it over to Stucky for a quick word from our sponsor, DraftKings.
The Big Bets on Campus podcast has teamed up with DraftKings Sportsbook, where new customers can bet $5 and get $300 back in bonus bets if your bet wins. Stay in on the action and use your bonus bets on DraftKings same-game parlays for a shot at an even bigger payout. To get started, use code BBOC when signing up with DraftKings. Again, use code BBOC when signing up and bet $5 to get $300 back in bonus bets if your bet wins. The crown is yours.
Thanks, Duck. Don't miss any of our best bets by signing up for Action Pro. Action Pro gets users real-time alerts as soon as experts like Stucky, Duck, Christian, myself put them in the app. So get the best bets at the best prices. You also get real-time money projections, percentages, see where the bets are going, see where the money is flowing, and it's all about tailing the smart money. You're also going to get NFL player prop projections through the NFL playoffs, powered by Sean Kerner and his predictive analytics team, and soon Dr. Nick is going to be bringing more of his college basketball player props to the table as well, which you absolutely want to take advantage of with Action Pro. Just go to actionnetwork.com/pro to get started and use promo code POD20 for $20 off an annual subscription. That's promo code POD20 for $20 off an Action Network Pro account. Go to actionnetwork.com/pro. All right, time for the reason that you're all here. Some best bets. We're going to go around the horn and give out our top plays for Thursday, Friday, and a few looks at the Saturday slate as well. Duck, let's get started. Out west, you're looking Weber State, Northern Arizona. Looking for a total here projected in the 150 range.
Yeah, Weber State's really dropped the hammer on their pace the last 3 games, playing 75 possessions against non-Division I Lincoln University. They played 84 possessions against Portland State and 77 possessions against Sac State in recent games. And all these games have had a ton of points, as has their game against Utah Valley and Utah Tech. So it can be hard to bet the under here, but I'm looking at this next stretch of games being played in Flagstaff, Arizona and Greeley, Colorado. And playing 2 games in a 48-hour stretch at elevation is going to be really tough on these guys. So I can see Coach Eric Duft really just being a little bit more comfortable operating at the pace Northern Arizona wants to play at. NAU has really throttled down the tempo since hitting league play. And I look at both of these teams being methodical in their shot process here. Northern Arizona and Weber are both sub 300 level in three-point shooting and are both poor foul shooting teams. So I think with Weber knowing what they're up against going to Greeley to play Northern Colorado, I think this is the time to throttle down the tempo. I think this one will probably be played 64, 65 possessions with a projected total of 150 or so. I think we should go under here.
All right, let's stick on Thursday night, another under, and Liberty's involved. So you have my attention because they are an absolute snail.
Yeah, 334th in adjusted tempo. Louisiana Tech is 353rd nationally. Louisiana Tech 340th in effective field goal percentage and absolutely cannot shoot the 3 ball. Nearly last in all of college basketball in 3-point percentage and made 3-point shots. And if you can't shoot the ball from outside against this Liberty team, you're going to be in some big time trouble. They're not going to get to the line. Their interior offense should get nothing cheap inside. But both of these defenses are top 70 level in forcing low percentage or poor shots. I look at the games they played against each other last year, kind of a familiar opponent. Last year, one stayed under and the other went over, but it took a 100-point second half to get there. I don't think we see the scoring outburst here. Anything 133, 134, I'm diving in on the under.
All right, I'm going to stick on Thursday. Santa Clara catching double digits at the Kennel against the Zags. I'm hoping to get 13.5, 14 in this spot. Of the 360-plus Division I teams, the Zags are 13th worst in terms of playing down to their competition per Evan Mia. They get up for the big ones like Bama, Oregon, UCLA, but then they needed overtime to take out Seattle, as I mentioned earlier in the show. Mark Few, 2-5 against the spread in his last 7, and that San Diego performance from GU showed their disinterest in winning big. They were up 21 with 7 to go in that game. They allowed the Toreros to cut it to 5 in the closing seconds. This Broncos team on the other side for Santa Clara, they have the scoring, at least in my opinion, to keep pace here, particularly if they have a big night on the glass. They're 5th in offensive rebounding percentage, and freshman Alan Graves gives them a big shot in the arm off the bench. He does most of his work on the offensive glass. Christian Hammonds, by the way, now averaging 17 points per game. One of the best players on the West Coast, one of the biggest glow-ups from a freshman to sophomore season perspective in the entire country. But this really comes down to my trust of Herb Sendek. In the last 5 full seasons, he's hit 20 or more wins every single time, 7 wins in March Madness in his career. He's not afraid of the Zags, beat them last year at the Kennel, beat them at home the year before that. So the aura that GU usually has when they roll out the balls and teams are just terrified, it doesn't apply to the Broncos. So I'm going to go ahead and take the points. Like I said, I'm hoping to get north of 13 here. That's kind of my cutoff. And then I'm going to go even lower, from a mid-major league to a low-major league. Binghamton traveling up to Burlington to take on the Vermont Catamounts. I would lay this one all the way up to 22 with Vermont, and it's pretty simple in terms of the projection. Coming into the year, it looked like Binghamton could finally break through, not necessarily vie for a conference title or to get back to the tournament for the first time since 2009, but finally get a winning season on the books, be competitive throughout the year. And a big part of that was on the shoulders of Demetrius Lilly. He was somebody who was an elite rebounder. He was going to bring in a lot of post presence for them. And without him in the lineup, he's still sidelined with a shoulder injury. They've lost 6 straight to Division I teams. Most of that losing streak was with him on the bench. I think without him in this lineup, they're one of the worst teams in the entire sport. Bottom 10 in turnover margin. And without Lilly, they cannot get an offensive rebound to save their life. So what that creates is so many extra possessions, extra scoring opportunities for their opponents. And it's time to get on the Gus bus here, because with Lilly also gone, you look at Yalden. He's going to kill these guys. I expect 25 and 8 from the Seton Hall transfer. He's someone who's so dynamic, and I think he's only going to get better in AE play. And then Becker, the final piece of the puzzle for me. When you look at the best coaches to back in low major basketball on their home floors, you could do a lot worse than Becker. Since he took over, he's covered 56% of the time on his home floor and almost 60% of his conference games. Both of those rates are the best in the America East since he showed up. So I'm going to go ahead and lay the big number with Vermont. All right, going to kick it now for some plays on Saturday that you're interested in, Christian.
I'll start with Indiana. You mentioned it before. Nebraska is very legit. You don't start the season 15-0 with a road win at Illinois. Take care of Michigan State at home. Even in non-con, Creighton, Wisconsin, Oklahoma, Kansas State, New Mexico. It's a lot of good wins, and they do it on both ends. I know their offense can be really fun at times, but they just, gritted out a couple wins. Defensively, they're awesome, just with the no middle. They don't foul. They're disciplined, and that's all great. But Indiana at home is a really good offensive team, and I didn't even realize how good of a defensive team they are. They're 31st in KenPom defensively, 9th in effective field goal percentage allowed. And what do they do offensively that suits this matchup against Nebraska? They take a ton of threes, and they're 7th in the country in assist rate, 15th in three-point attempt rate. We saw Lamar Wilkerson break an Indiana record at home shooting the three ball. I think that they have the spacing and the discipline. And Darren DeVries, I trust him. He's kind of a psycho film guy, and I think that he will have his guys in advantageous positions to just take advantage of the way Nebraska really loads up the ball side and just be able to find open threes. So I think Indiana will hand Nebraska their first loss of the season in front of a packed home gym.
Anything else on Saturday that you're leaning towards?
Yes, this one's kind of gross. But how about the Pitt Panthers against Syracuse? They swept them last year. Pitt 7-8 on the season. Just lost, but they just played two top 35 ACC teams really tight. They were up double digits in the first half against Miami, ended up losing by 7. Malik Renault was just kind of too much on the inside, and they went really cold shooting the ball in the second half. And then Clemson, who's maybe the second best team in this league, we don't really know at this point, but that's a team that really plays inside out, has a lot of bigs, and they only allowed 4 offensive rebounds, and they hung really tight in that 5-point loss. Now you get a week off, no game in the middle of the week, and you play a Syracuse team that, you get Donnie Freeman back in the mix. They're really good defensively. They're awful free throw shooting team, and I just love Pitt's guards. Like this is a team that has some fun, talented guards that can create off the dribble, and I think that suits you well. The way that they can shoot the ball and space you out against a defense that has elite rim protection with William Kyle and with the Donnie Freeman. So I like Pitt. Love the spot. Love how they competed against two teams that are better offensively and are kind of built similarly. This is a good spot to back Jeff Capel's boys.
All right, we have a trio of picks on Friday. Let me get it kick-started in the Mid-American. We talked about how great the point guard play across this conference has been. Akron, Bowling Green. I'm going to go over all the way up to the edge of 170. And I just want to treat myself to an up-tempo game with great guard play. The Zips are 32nd in tempo. And when you dig into Bowling Green, yes, they're outside the top 100 in tempo, but they can't resist playing faster if their opponents, essentially challenge them and try to have an up-and-down game. Just look at their last 3 games. All top 50 tempo opponents in Miami, UMass, and Kent. The average points scored in those games total, 189 points. I mentioned the guard play, Tavari Johnson, but also Bowling Green's Javonte Campbell. Campbell is somebody who, he can get hot from just about anywhere on the floor. He had 47 against UMass in, the past 2 weeks. He took 27 foul shots in that game. And that's what I'm kind of looking for in terms of stability of high-end scoring. Sometimes you can have those nights where you're not going to drop 15 three-pointers, but if you have somebody who's consistently stopping the game, getting to the charity stripe, I think that certainly benefits us. Tavari Johnson, as I mentioned, one of the rare unicorns in the sport that can impact the game from a playmaker perspective at such a high level, scoring over 20 and giving out 5 dimes per game. Bowling Green, by the way, has fallen off a cliff defensively, and Akron's transition game, I think, is going to eat them up. They're averaging over 17 points per game in transition, those fast break opportunities, which is top 30 in the sport. So like I said, I'll go all the way up to the verge of 170. I'm hoping to get something in the 160s. I think this is a dead over shot. All right, Duck, getting you back involved here. Talk to me about Marist on Friday night.
Yeah, really, Marist needs to wash the road stink off of them. In their first 2 league games on the road ended in defeat. They lost to Quinnipiac. They lost to St. Peter's. And those 2 teams are significantly stronger defensive and more talented teams than Sacred Heart. So I really think this matchup is going to favor John Dunn and the Marist defense. I worry about Sacred Heart being able to hold on to the basketball here. This defense is just so nasty. Really a quintessential example of a defense that defends for the entire shot clock. They've done well to defend without fouling. They don't give up a lot of cheapies in close. And if you look at Sacred Heart, who has lost 4 in a row, their leading scorer, Anquan Hill, hasn't played since December 13th, and their offense has just looked so jerky without him in the fold. I mean, as long as we don't get a reserve or bench guy going for 30 or Marist shooting 2 out of 27 from 3, I think that the Foxes win this one going away. So with a projected line of about 6.5, I'm going to lay it with Marist.
Now, Christian, I'm glad that you're bringing up Minnesota, a potential money line play against USC, because in the transfer portal era, everyone's looking for instant gratification. And sometimes when those players from mid-major levels transfer up and it doesn't work, people write them off entirely. Cade Tyson is one of those guys. Going from Belmont to UNC, he was invisible. He didn't impact the game whatsoever for the Tar Heels. Maybe some people wrote him off. That was a mistake. He's closing in on 50, 40, 80 kind of shooting. He's someone that has elevated this team, and you like them against the Trojans.
Absolutely. Real quick from my other 2 plays, those are spots where I'm expecting close to a pick 'em or a small number on the home team, and I'm willing to play that up to a possession. This is another spot where I think it's really important to be on the opener because USC is 46th on KenPom. Minnesota's 91st. USC they won Maui. They were a different team then. They had way more players. They had
Rice at least for a portion of Maui.
Yes, true. That's when Rice did go down. But Ryan Cornish coming over from Dartmouth was a guy that I know he was a good player at Dartmouth, and he came here and he was supposed to be 9th or 10th man. He started against Michigan State. Chad Baker-Mazara, I don't have all the details, but him coming off the bench, not playing well. Clearly something going on there. They're not getting much out of Jordan Marsh. 5 scoreless minutes against Michigan State. He's the guy who hit the buzzer beater against Troy. It's really weak outside of Asar and Kofi, and there's just a lot of pressure on them. Now, schedule-wise, you just got your asses kicked by Michigan and Michigan State Friday, Monday. You go back to, I assume you're going back to California for a couple days before coming back out to the Midwest to go play at Minnesota. Really sucky spot in Minnesota. Cade Tyson under the radar, like you said, in the portal, post-hype sleeper, playing really well, but it's this top 7 for Minnesota. Medved is just a sick coach, man. They're number 1 in the country in assist rate. Like, they just know how to play basketball together, and defensively, up to 63rd on KenPom, and a lot of that is just coaching and discipline. They don't really have anything crazy, like athletically or personnel-wise, but I just love the way they're playing. They're in rhythm, and this USC team, man, it's just a hard sell for me. So this is a line that could come in and move a lot. This could go from like a pick 'em to like Minnesota -5 or 6. So I would love to get in on this early at a small number. I have money line down now just because KenPom has USC as a favorite. So we'll see how sharp the market is here.
Now, before we get out of here, we're going to put together a quick 3-leg parlay over on DraftKings with our favorite plays from this episode. Obviously, we don't have all of the numbers in front of us right now, so we'll try to give a range. Duck, you like Marist. What number would you bet it up to? You're hoping to get them laying 6.5.
Yeah, I'd lay up to 8.5. I just think this is a spot. Last year, they went to Sacred Heart and lost, and it triggered a 4-game losing streak to conclude the regular season, which carried into postseason play. And I would imagine that Marist has a pretty bad taste in their mouth left from that. So I think they're really locked in here and focused on wanting to beat this team. I'd lay up to 8.5.
Now, the Golden Gophers at this point, 5 wins in a row. If the secret is out, if there's any steam on this, what would you play it up to if they end up laying points in this spot?
I'd go to like 4.5, 5. I feel really confident in them. But like I said, I think this is one that Friday, early afternoon, this is going to be my number one thing I'll be looking for. I'm sorry, Thursday, early afternoon. I will be looking to get in on this number as soon as possible.
This is my shout out to Tanner McGrath, our America East expert. Always go and check out his write-ups. He also interviews all the coaches. At this point, I think he's like an assistant coach at one of these programs, because the insight that he has, the cut-ups, the film work, everything. I made sure to vet this pick with him. I was like, we're on Vermont in this spot. He's like, absolutely, without Lilly. He confirmed that Lilly's shoulder injury is going to keep him sidelined for that reason. I'll go 1 point further on the tick up, here. I'll go Vermont all the way up to -22 here at home against the Bearcats to complete our DraftKings 3-leg parlay. All right, that's it for the DraftKings College Hoops Parlay this week. The crown is yours. And that'll do it for our episode here. The Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by DraftKings. My thanks to Duck and to Christian for joining me. As always, you can do us a big favor by subscribing on YouTube, by, liking, by commenting. It always helps in terms of engagement to make sure that we're discoverable for other people out there, as well as your 5-star ratings and review. The next 5-star rating that shouts out this particular show, Duck and I are going to give out a futures ticket for, whatever you'd like. We'll go $10, $20. Depends, how much we like your play. Final Four, national title, Wooden Award. We just want you guys to get some skin in the game, and you are what makes the show possible. So we appreciate you listening, engaging with us out there on Twitter and in the comments section as well. Thanks again for listening to the Big Bets on Campus podcast presented by DraftKings. Best of luck with all your bets.